Thank you for staying with us. Nigeria's broadcast media industry has come a long way since its inception in 1933, when the British colonial government established the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation. It was initially NBS, Nigeria Broadcasting Service. Over the years, the industry has grown significantly with the emergence of new television and radio stations, satellite television, and digital broadcasting. Today, television and radio broadcasting play a pivotal role in shaping Nigeria's cultural, social, and political landscape. They have become essential mediums for information dissemination, entertainment, and education, connecting Nigerians across the country and beyond. From news and current affairs to music and entertainment, broadcast media have something for everyone. As the industry continues to evolve, Nigerians can expect even more exciting developments in the world of broadcast. With the rise of digital technology, new opportunities are emerging for content creators and audiences alike. Whether you're a seasoned media professional or just a keen observer, one thing is clear: Nigeria's broadcast media industry is here to stay, and its impact will only continue to grow. Well, joining us in the studio to explore the impact of broadcasting on Nigeria's development are two industry experts. One is a veteran broadcaster and career mentor, Ambrose Olutayo Shomide. Good morning. It's good to have you join us.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And another is also a broadcaster and creative director of Yellow Bloom Consulting, Anika De Funke Treasure. It's how you wrote the name down.
And the cadence, the rhythm to it.
I mean, it's good to have you.
Thank you. It's good
Looking
to be
as
here.
beautiful as ever.
Oh, from one beautiful soul to
another. Anyway, let's talk broadcasting and how it has evolved over the years. You are the veterans. I am still walking the path to understand, the landscape, but you have been there before me. So let me begin with you, Funke. How we have evolved over the years from colonial times up until now, from your perspective.
I think we've had a rich trajectory to this point. Back in the days, just as you've said in your opening, we've evolved from the colonial past. Just this morning I was reading up, and I recall reading that and comparing that with where the South African media also started from apartheid and colony. So we have this history of struggle, evolving from there. But where we are today, I think we've done quite a lot, from the days of the WNBC, WNTV, to the evolving of Radio Nigeria, NTA. Those were the two giants we had back then, in addition to the state's radio stations or broadcast stations. And then we had the private radio stations
coming in.
Where the likes of Ambrose Shomide got really big and made such an impact. But yes, for me, it will be a good pass mark for us in the broadcast industry. We have our challenges, and I know we're coming to that. But,
absolutely.
But yes, we've done very well for ourselves within the African context.
Interesting. From your perspective, how well have we done?
Well, pass mark to an extent, but at the same time, I would really get in it. In terms of opening up the space, yes, since 1992, when the broadcast ecosystem and environment was deregulated to now, you've seen the opening of space, so many stations coming on board.
For the private sector players to come.
Private sector players. But then, is it about the spread or about the quality of the content?
Right.
Yeah, I think for me, yes, to an extent that it has opened up the environment for private players to come in, for other stakeholders to also play. But in terms of the content, in terms of the quality of people that go on radio and go on TV, I think we still...
It has dwindled. Is that what you're saying?
Not dwindled. She'll agree with me that way back then, before you can go on radio or go on TV, apart from getting out of the university or training institutions, you are retrained for the real world. But here, you have people opening up stations, and you just have all kinds of I'm sorry, elements going on radio, going on TV, and then just do anything. Just like content creators, taking up the whole environment with all kinds of manners of content. That is what you have on radio now. I think for radio, I'm very, very comfortable to talk about that.
But you see, a situation where organizations, like, I want to pick it up from what he's talked about, which is also concerning for a majority of veterans who look at the situation on the ground and tell you that this is not how things were when we were, actively involved in the business of broadcasting. And they say that, okay, before you coming, like he rightly pointed out, there are several steps of trainings you have to go through. But in a situation where you see organizations say they just want a pretty face, you look good, or you sound good, that is all we want. Is that, how do we situate that being a challenge? Is it that the space need to have been regulated in such a way that the structures you put in place as an organization meet certain standards before you can begin?
Well, there's a lot packed in what you've just, the question you've just asked. And I'll start with content that Ambrose talked about. The fact that we have a proliferation of skit makers all over the place. They're producing content. The biggest challenge I think we have, in addition to that of manpower, is that of content. So we're now contending with skit makers who have a proliferation of creations, both all over social media. So what's the time being given to radio, TV, and digital content? And then how are we giving context to our own content? Because skit makers don't give content, they just do slapstick comedy, they just, it's on the surface. But we have the advantage of giving context with our productions. Are we rising to the occasion? I'll leave that there and return to it later. In the talking about that, of the quality of people behind, working in legacy media, traditional media, TV and radio. I think along the way, owners decided to not pay attention to training. And the culture of broadcasting was lost along the way. I don't know whether it's the advent of deregulation, private broadcasting, as Ambrose said, but what I see nowadays is that people are in a hurry to go on air. Truly, back in the days when I joined, it didn't matter where you were coming from, whether you read languages, you read English, you read mass comm, you will still go through about 3 months of observation before you actually hug the mic to say, to give time check.
Right, time check.
Time check.
Right.
It's not a walk in the park for you. And then it's not like now, I don't listen to radio anymore, to be honest with you, only when I'm in my car. Why? Because I'm perpetually at work. The other day, somebody gave a time check, I almost fainted, like, what is this? It's ridiculous, the things you hear on radio nowadays. And it's because people just railroad elements on radio. And you wonder, where is this one coming from? But you see, in the past, I would call the owners of the station and say, I just heard this on your station. And then at some
point... We can't do that anymore?
No, I don't do that anymore because, I don't want to become a nuisance.
Right.
You have your own radio station. You know why you opened the radio station in the first instance. I think quality of personnel on radio or TV should be paramount. And you should actually set aside some fund for training. You cannot do this job without consistent training for the people you have on.
Absolutely, I agree with you. But you hear some organizations say that you should train yourself. You should do everything you want for yourself. But so let's even come to perhaps give us your experience, what it was like before you got on the air and then the kinds of training you had to go through.
Way back in Radio Nigeria, where I started from, you come in 3 months, you're just sitting in. Be it the newsroom, presentation, you sit in for 3 months, and then you go to the FRC training school, now called the Broadcast Academy.
Yes.
And then you're trained, basic basic.
And you go through particular career trajectory.
Yeah.
You do presentation levels 1, 2, 3, production levels 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
You know,
So, and then you come back, and it takes another weeks before you can give time check, as you said. And then that time check is not something that you just say. You have to script it. You script every word that you say on radio. But now people just come in, they want to ad-lib everything. You can see that when we were coming in, we had our notes. That is the old training, the kind of training that we got growing up in the business. Then, you went through all of that, and then the private radio came, and then the field became so saturated now, and all comers came in. People,
you needed to have a particular accent to be able to do
you said something that, okay,
the accent.
Media will now worry about how you sound, as long as you sound well.
Yeah.
It goes beyond sounding well.
Right.
It's about the depth of knowledge that you have, how exposed you
are.
You see, some people just go on radio, go on TV, and they say things, and you say, where is this one coming from? The level of ignorance that is being passed on, it's such that, yeah, I used to call station owners, but how many station owners do you want to call now?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I was in Ibadan 2 days ago, and then just sitting down there in the audience, and they were seeing number of stations, some names that I've never heard in my life. So these are stations. So how many do you want to call? And I was just sitting there, sitting there, and the punishment that you get is when people get on, maybe to, it was an award, and people get to acknowledge the award and thank people, and they are mispronouncing words.
Oh,
and
that's not good there.
They say this person is winning something, and I just took my note, and I was writing. I wanted to, call them, but it was late in the night.
Your notes will be full.
I wanted to just go. That's the challenge that we have in the industry at the moment.
Mispronunciation of names, mispronunciation of words on radio. Back in the days, you learned from radio. Your father would tell you, go and listen to radio. That's where you pick up. Nowadays, I don't think I can advise anybody to do that now, because you just don't know who your child is going to encounter on radio. You talked about the accent debate. At some point in this industry, it was like if you didn't have an American accent, you went rolling R where there is no R, you hadn't arrived. Door. Good morning. Everywhere there is an R somewhere. What's going on here?
Right.
And interestingly, because most media owners, radio and TV owners, are not broadcasters. They're not professionals.
Right.
So you have them actually looking for those with these ridiculous R in rolling R up and down.
So they have a challenge with picking the ideal persons.
They have that challenge with professionalism in terms of presentation. Let's not even come to production yet, because everybody is doing the same thing now. So in presentation, they're not concerned. They're just looking for, I think, my line of thoughts, because I have a lot to say. And I think it's because at some point we had a Dan Foster, the late Dan Foster.
Yes.
And so he came with this American culture, and everybody wanted to be like, like Dan Foster. So people started this R thing. Ambrose.
Was it really about Dan Foster?
I think at some point.
It was before Dan Foster. One thing that, since the advent of private radio, there was this we were looking out for people who have that guttural voice, like, oh, how are you? People that talk like Americans. And you now have someone who comes from a particular side of the country with all the age problem, with all the development problem. Development problem, you know what I'm talking about.
No, I know.
We understand.
and he's so happy.
It's a happy day.
to now mimic Americans. You can imagine the struggle. You can imagine the disaster. It's not even a struggle, it's a disaster on radio. And that's what we have. That's what we have. And when you call them, sit them down to say, okay, attend this training, they don't have the time. They don't have the time.
Okay, so that reminds me about postmortem. The other day I was talking with some people and I said, I talked about post-mortem. They looked at me like, don't even try. Because nowadays, when you went for post-mortem is this kind of meeting you do about production and presentation once a week, in many cases back in the day. Nowadays, they say there are no post-mortems anymore in many places. And to use your word, that is disastrous. Because that is where you evaluate what you have done in the past week, all the programs, who pronounced this right, who didn't pronounce this right, what went into what program and what should have been in that program. Are we focusing on this sector alone? What about, some diversity here? If there are no postmortems anymore, then there is trouble because that is the in-house powerhouse for training and development, for manpower development.
Right.
So if that is gone in most stations, then we have a challenge in our hands.
Absolutely. I agree with you. That brings me to something she mentioned earlier on, where she said that some media or most media owners do not have that background knowledge of broadcasting. Do you think that that also has contributed to where we find ourselves now?
Yeah, to an extent, yes. But it will surprise you that some of these media owners also hire people who have been in radio. Who have been in radio as managers.
But do they listen to them? There you go. There you go. Because now the owners are bringing their cousins and nephews and wherever, and their friends, daughters and sons from everywhere, and they say, oh, she has a great face for TV. They say, oh, good morning, this is TVC. And you think that's all about it. No, you cannot want to be a presenter and you have no idea what's gone on in Nigeria yesterday. You don't know what's going on in Afghanistan and Russia and all of those places. You have no idea of developments internationally. You want to be a presenter. Yeah. I have, interacted with a lot of them because I coach and I mentor.
Yeah.
And it is amazing how many people want to come into presentation who don't have any reason to be. I recall when I was in service, a lot of our politicians also brought in square pegs for our round holes. And so what do? You allow them in the system, they grow, and they're just growing for nothing because they are not professional. And what has happened to funding for training? Even in the FRCN training school, not everyone gets to go because your station will have to plan and pay for you at the training school. So a lot of people are not having the chance to go to these training centers, which brings us to the challenge of funding in the industry. Yes, we have a lot of stations, proliferation of radio stations, actually much more than TV stations, but how funded are they?
Right.
But that's another angle.
A critical angle.
A critical angle. Not only about funding, about running the stations too, because that's a big challenge for us as operators and managers of media organizations. I don't know how you manage here, but I know that, especially since this advent of Bande, it's been hell for media owners to run. When you want to keep the station running, you want to talk about welfare, which is another critical angle.
Yes, we'll definitely get there.
Talk about, and then you talk of training. Yes, we need to invest in capacity building and all of that. But in an environment where you discover that advertising revenue is dropping, there's challenge coming from the social media and other platforms, and so the revenue is not there. There's no support from anywhere. Recently, we met in Benin as broadcasting organizations of Nigeria, and we made a walk right to the government to say, please, you need to save the broadcasting industry.
Right.
We came up with a communique to the government. You need to come in, look at energy costs and the cost of running. Can you help us pay 50% of our...
Like they did for hospitals and institutions, tertiary institutions.
Because this is an industry that is employing thousands, if not millions of people, directly and indirectly. And so you need to come in and help us, because if care is not taken, as we speak, there are stations that have gone off air. There are stations that are operating maybe some 3-4 hours in a day. because of the energy cost and running cost. So it's okay. Can you help us with CNG powered generating set to help our businesses and all of that, among other recommendations and contained that in their communication. So you talk about running costs, you talk about welfare, you talk about a host of other things.
So training is insignificant.
It is not.
It's significant,
it's
but
very, very significant. So,
the line of things is far behind.
The thing is, it's a business.
Right.
It's a business of running a radio station or TV station is a business, much as it is a profession. And when you're in business, there has to be profits made. And if you have factors militating against you being in business, then it is critical. And so I join my voice with that of Ambrose to say, look, we need an injection of funds and supports in the broadcast industry. Right from COVID, the COVID era, a lot of stations have been faltering, wobbling since then, trying to find their feet. Even as the NBC had, given a lot of people licenses. What we're saying is we need the government to look at the broadcast industry and, support in very many ways. As Ambrose said, the state of the nation is really affecting TV stations, yes, and radio stations. Many are off air. And then the ad spend has reduced considerably because again, the state of the nation is affecting the advertising.
Aside that, because we have skit makers, we have the advent of new media online, so they'd rather channel their resources online, talking about advertisers, meet with these persons because they feel that the eyeballs is now shifting towards online digital space.
Yes.
So that is also another challenge. How has that really impacted traditional media, and how can traditional media still remain relevant? Because we talked about relevance, and how this is also changing the narrative for them.
Well, the argument has always been that, okay, with the advent of social media, will radio and TV still be relevant? I can tell you that for 100 years, radio and TV will still remain relevant.
With dwindling revenue and all of it?
I don't think it's a matter of a change of business model. But if you change your business model, then you have a lot of concentration in the social media space as well. So you compete and bring in context, which they lack. And then we take over. It's like blogging. It's like podcasting. The more you have professionals there, the more you displace the citizen journalists and broadcasters there, because we have to compete. Gone are the days when we thought, we were the alpha and the omega of this sort of thing. We now have to contend with citizens who are coming in to fight.
When radio started, when TV came, many had believed that TV was going to, make radio irrelevant.
That's
but
right.
Radio has remained the #1 influencer in the world.
Right.
Yeah. Take it or leave it. It's, this person has 100 million followership, is an influencer, and blah, blah, blah. Radio remains #1 influencer. If you want to test that, say something on radio and see the reaction immediately. You have to have data to start to click, to follow, to do all of that. And some of these followership are farmed. And that's the reality. So, but radio, you don't farm it. People listen. And if you want to also test that, go to the north. The average person in the north has a transistor radio and it follows programming on radio. Both programming coming from within and outside Nigeria. So social media will come here like TV came, contending with radio, contending with the print media, but it's never been able to either push the print media, displace them. Yeah. So that is the reality. Now radio and TV will have to also move. And we are already moving. And that's why you see some of your content being put on in capsules, 5 minutes, in modules, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, for people who are on the go, who are on the move to see and watch and follow. Because if you don't do that, if you still continue to do it the traditional way, you are going to lose the audience, you're going to lose the market. And that's why for TVC, I see most of the time, maybe in the next 30 minutes, some of these things that we're doing here will be captured online and put there. That is the future. If you don't do that, and newspapers too, they're already taking our jobs. They now have
they have their
TV
own
channels, studios. They push their content online and all of that. Because if you don't do that, you go extinct.
That's true.
That's the fact.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. There is a radio culture in the northern part of Nigeria that nobody can, it's a matter of you can't touch this.
Yeah.
It's
Don't
forever
touch this,
there, yeah. And then even here in the other parts of Nigeria, you find that even the illiterate, have you seen the way people listen to newspaper review?
Yeah.
Especially in the languages.
Yes.
It is a phenomenon.
It's massive.
You can't take that away from legacy media. We still have that power. I say we because, we. We still have that. We got the power.
Now, that brings me to the other matter, talking about misinformation, disinformation, and all of it. It's become a major challenge as we speak. And the traditional media sometimes try to resolve all of that. But before you can even do that, the fake news has spread like wildfire. But whatever you're trying to resolve or change at the end of the day doesn't go as far. Now, this issue, how do we deal with it? It's a major challenge. And even the advent of AI, we have seen where certain persons have been put up to be speaking in a certain way. Meanwhile, it's fake. Deep fake, as it is.
Well, I think at a discussion session that NBC put together, I think it was Africa's, this issue came up, fake news and all of that. And I took a different position. We have flogged this issue of fake news. Fake news is something that you mine. You mine stories and you pass it as being true, original. The one that is dangerous is what we now refer to as alternative fact. Alternative fact. The fact is we are here.
Right.
Okay? And we're talking. I can come up with statistics that are partially fact and twist that statistics to confuse their facts. For example, a politician takes the podium to say, in Egypt, a 25-kilometer road was constructed with 1 billion naira and was completed in a week. Why is Nigeria spending 25 billion naira in constructing a 1-kilometer road? And it's somebody that has large followership, not only on the social media, large followership in Nigeria. Is a politician. Now, the fact is, yes, Egypt constructed that road.
Right.
But what are the facts in constructing that road? What are the details? As in, have you really looked at all the angles? But he's there because of the believability of his personality and coming with this thing. The integrity of what he's saying is questionable, but he has passed it on. Right. And many semi-illiterate, illiterate would take that. I said, you see, Nigeria is wasting a lot of money. These people, very profligate. These people, da. Whereas, when you do the critical analysis of what he has just dropped, you discover that it was partially, the truth, but not full truth. So we need to be very, very careful with the way politicians twist facts. And that's why during the last debate that President Biden had with Trump, they had on-time fact-checking.
Fact-checking was amazing.
Amazing fact-checking. Because they have realized the impact of, not fake news now, alternative fact. On the last American election, on the 2016 campaign, the French election, the Brexit, and all of that.
Landscape,
Yeah, and so if we are not very, very careful, that one is more rife than fake news. Fake news,
misinformation,
all of that. But alternative facts, especially by political actors, very, very good. But do we have the facility and the capacity to fact check on time in Nigeria? I think we should start looking
in that direction.
Well, I think we should have a more discerning public, viewing and listening public, and reading public. I think, again, it's changing because then you find links going around a particular issue.
On social media.
And on social media, and people are asking, are the legacy media on this story? I can't find any source anywhere. I am impressed because now we have a public that has become more discerning. They say, no, this as Guardian picked it, is TVC
I think that is an overgeneralization. When you say the public, we have just said something that the sophistication in the northern part of the country, yes, they have access to radio, they have access to that, but also they're also exposed to the social media. So if you pass something on, before you could fact check, to start asking.
They're waiting to hear it on radio. That's the difference now. So if you pass it on, the advantage they have is that they're still waiting to hear it on radio. They've not heard it on radio, then it's not true yet. And what I'm saying is that presently, our people are beginning to see that it's not everything, distributed or shared on WhatsApp, particularly, that you believe. They're beginning to ask questions. Are the legacy media carrying the story? I have not read it anywhere. You hear people saying that. I have not heard.
Or they pick on certain persons who they trust.
Yes, and say, oh, well, Ambrose has not shared it. Ambrose has not said anything about it. Treasure has not said anything about it.
I don't think it's true.
So we need to also not lose sight of the fact that legacy media too have been misled on a number of occasions.
By some of the things they found on social media.
Because of this urge to break the news,
be the first to
be the first, commercialization,
and,
being out there.
Trying to compete.
And then what's going on there?
Right, yes, that's true. That happened some time ago.
Yeah.
With our newspapers, yes.
Right. Okay.
Not only newspapers, TV stations, radio stations.
Yes.
Yeah.
That happened. But then that brings me to the next matter, which has to do with how the broadcast media has been able to shape narrative, changing culture, educate people. That's what we're supposed to do. Because you mentioned something as the public needs to be informed, alert, understand what is going on. But then if the broadcast media does not fit them with the right information, some of them would never know. Yes, they have alternative now of online, going there to search and know, but not all of them still go to do that. We saw for the past election, we saw how that also happened, shaping narratives. Some persons were here, this ones were there, and that also made a lot of persons tilt to certain broadcast stations and say, you know what, whatever this one is saying is what we believe as it is. We lean towards this one. So from your perspective, how have we been able to do this in such a way that it is balanced, accurate, and informative?
I think what we need to do more, what we lack right now, is compelling content. Content that will continue to draw people to us, because we lose, that's the truth. We lose listenership, we lose viewership.
Absolutely.
To not just digital media, but even cable. So people would rather pay for their cable usage and access foreign radios and, TVs, radio stations and TVs. So what is the content that is that compelling to make people stay with us? I said earlier that we seem to be doing the same thing in the mornings. We're all doing the same thing. We're all on the same topic. We're all doing the same format: news, breakfast, music. Where are the documentaries? Some TV stations like yours are beginning to return to documentaries, because documentaries give you depth and context.
Yes.
Special features, special reports give you, but then I know they cost money. Investigative pieces, before you go there, I know, because I know you're going to ask. Investigative pieces cost money.
Absolutely.
One investigation investigative report can take you like 3 months, sometimes 6 months, because you're tailgating somebody and you're trying to, do this over
get a holistic view of a subject
over time.
Yeah.
So yes, indeed. But what about drama? Back in the days, we ran to Village Headmaster. We ran to Second Chance. We ran to Sheki Sheki Alao, and all of those. They're gone on TV and radio, because I think we became too sophisticated for our good.
Right.
But we need to revisit the formats available through which we can give additional context to what is happening in the country, especially as we are a developing country. We cannot continue to ape developed countries in terms of content. What are we doing regarding the SDGs? We need them more. What are we doing about poverty? What are we doing about health, gender this, gender that, livable cities? Where are they? How are we injecting all of this into our programming? Do we even have this variety of programming? You see, so we need to work on that. Again, we need to, context, compelling content, generate interest for people. It will bring people to us. So after you've watched all the content skits on digital media, you now want to return to a TVC to say, oh, I watched this documentary. Then it makes you think. What we need is critical thinking. That is what we should be eliciting in our viewers and our listeners.
But there are those who tell you the attention span of this generation is something, it's very minute, and so may not even want to sit that long to watch a documentary, watch whatever it is that you put together.
They're not the policymakers.
Right.
They're not.
Yeah. But they shape a certain narrative.
They do.
Absolutely.
Understandably, but they don't take all the decisions. What we want to do is target the decision makers and educate the ones who don't know what's going on. Because then you go to Twitter and you see what's the depth in what we talk about on Facebook, on Twitter, because they're all at the surface.
All right, just before we lose focus of what you asked a critical question of influence and how we have been able to shape, and you I think alluded to what happened during the last election and all that. I think we need to be very, very careful going forward. As broadcasters, as anchor persons, as producers on TV and radio, we need to know that we are there to represent the public and balance proprietorial interests and the interests of the people against national security. A situation where an anchor person gets so immersed in the political
the political developments around him.
in such a way that it becomes so partisan, and then you're pushing agenda, you're assuming knowledge, you want to become the bishop, all-knowing, and you know, people come on your show, you're forcing your idea on them, and if they're not towing a particular line or going along with a particular narrative, then you want to shove them down.
That's it.
I think that is janjaweed journalism. and there's the need for us to be very, very careful because of the power that we hold, because of the power that individual holds. And most of the time you see that they leave the TV set and they take it online and they continue to, toe the same line, creating unnecessary tension, hatred, and pushing a particular narrative because they have that power of being on radio. That was not how we were brought up. And I keep telling people, you cannot be Fox TV in a day. You cannot be a CNN in a Nigerian environment. Yes, you can take all the principles and the philosophy guiding this business, but at the same time, you have to look at the Nigerian context. You say one wrong word, and you have a Rwanda on your hand.
That's right.
You push a particular narrative as an anchor person. You have a Kigali or what a South Sudan or Sudan on your hand, and so we need at every time when we go on TV to anchor shows or to interview people or to push an agenda, to have behind our mind that one, you need to have a peaceful Nigeria before you can apply this trade, before you can do TV or do radio.
Absolutely.
If there is a breakdown of law and order and the what we call it now, and everybody is running, there's no way you can come and sit down in this studio to say you want to, because you don't know what's going to drop on you. So you would need to have that behind our mind and just move away a little bit from this janjaweed journalism that we have put on radio. People pushing political agenda and trying to satisfy some interests and becoming spin doctors.
But they will tell you that some of this political interest that they are pushing are the ones funding them. So
they will not come out
They will not necessarily come out
to
you.
say, but if somebody is pushing you and they're pushing a narrative, you'll be shocked that these people that are pushing you, come tomorrow, they will shift side. And what will have become of you pushing that narrative? And when everything falls apart, where will you be? Where will you go? So we need to have that behind our minds going forward. That you
Spot
need to
on, Ambrose, because I recall I used to tell my staff back then, you are the true influencers. You are the true influencers, and never forget that, because in one single broadcast, you know how many people listening to you. In one single broadcast, you know how many people watching you. And that's why you find actors and actresses also wanting to be presenters, because it's a powerful place to be. It's a powerful space. And so what you say on air, seemingly to how many people are in the studio now, but there are millions watching us even outside the country, you know. So what you say is important, and you need to be responsible. You know, it's responsible broadcasting.
Right.
Ambrose has said it all. This idea of chasing narratives and helping to show up and then shouting people down on radio, we are supposed to probe. On current affairs programs, you probe. You don't lord it over your guests, and you don't push your own narrative, and you don't, you know, just push people to the
because
precipice.
of our time, that quickly brings me to the next matter of welfare. Some persons push this narrative because they feel, you know what, like I mentioned earlier, they are not being paid as they should, and so whoever pays the piper dictates the tune, and so they will give it all they've got in terms of pursuing a narrative.
And when everything breaks down, where will the piper and the trumpeter be? I think,
But we must touch this matter.
The issue of welfare is key. The broadcast environment is, as I said, is seriously challenged. Just like every other sector. But I think our own industry is in dire need of some redemption, so to say. I know that the issue of welfare is very, very key, and employers will need to do something about that, because there is no way a hungry person will not be influenced by whoever is behind the scene and all of that. But one thing that we have always shouted about is that you have to know your calling first. If you don't know your calling, then anything will call you. And
you will answer.
You will answer. So if you know your calling, okay, I am a professional. It's tough, yeah?
No, the issue is not the toughness of the matter. It's about how your call, you know your calling, but how is that call putting food on your bills? Yeah, paying your bills and putting food on your table. That's the issue.
Let me just quickly jump in there. I see that, yes, I see that our perception is not too good out there. People think media should be the last thing. You are comparing, you have to negotiate and negotiate and negotiate before you get good money. But they don't mind paying a comedian a lot of money, but you. Because they know that where you work, you are not paid that much.
We need to move to the next matter now. Now, quickly, we went to the streets to ask Nigerians this question. If you stumble